Like any art form, theater sprang from real human needs. Last time, we talked about how the instinct for storytelling, myth-making, and ritual influenced the birth of theater. As we said, most scholars believe theater evolved from the dithyrambic chorus ritual of the ancient Greek times. But the amazing part of this early development is how sophisticated theater began in a relatively short time. When one keeps in mind that humans weren't that far away from the cavemen at this time, the fact that the theater was performed in complicated amphitheaters and playwrights of the period were writing some of the greatest plays ever written, even by today's standards, we really need to give ancient Greek theater a close look. First, let's consider the physical theaters of the period. As we said last time, the amphitheaters were influenced by the early primitive worship grounds. Like these spaces, the circular areas known as the orchestra was still prominent. Translated from the ancient Greek, orchestra literally meant the dancing place. In this area, a group of performers known as the chorus played their parts and perhaps danced while they performed. In the plays performed at this time, the chorus of about 50 men typically represented some segment of society. For example, the chorus could represent the elders of a city, the senators to the king. In comedy, they represented such things as birds, clouds, and frogs. At the center of the orchestra was an altar known as the thymele. This altar has an interesting place in the development of ancient Greek theater. Over time, theater moved away from its religious roots and became secular in nature. We can see the location of the thymele change with this movement. In the beginning, the altar was situated in the center of the orchestra. Eventually, it was moved to the side of the orchestra. As the religious element of the theater began to fade altogether, the thymele was placed behind the scena, completely out of the sight of the audience. While the chorus performed their parts in the orchestra, the actors would perform episodes on a stage in front of a scene house that was referred to as the scena. The scena was situated to one end of the orchestra. It began as a temporary structure, but eventually took its place as a permanent part of the ancient Greek amphitheater and became quite elaborate. The scena was a house-like structure from where the actors would make their entrances and exits. There was also a raised stage in front of the scene house of the scena. The actors would not only perform on the raised stage, but there are also instances where the performances would take place on the roof of the scena. Typically, if there was a god who imposed his presence on the action of the play, the roof was a favorite playing space for the actors. Let's take a moment to consider the performers in the ancient Greek amphitheater. As we mentioned, the Greek tragedies were initially performed with a single actor playing all of the roles in the tragedy. His only dialogue would be with the choral leader, or perhaps members of the chorus. But how could a single actor play several roles in a single tragedy? It was done with one of the most significant theatrical devices of all time, the mask. You've often seen the tragedy and comedy mask displayed to represent theater. This is due to the mask's important role in the art of theater. In the early tragedies, the actor would enter from the scena wearing the mask of his character. He would engage in a scene with the chorus and then make an exit into the scene house section of the scena. When the actor entered for the next scene, or episode as it was referred to, they would be wearing a mask of a different character. In this way, they could introduce several characters in the course of the tragedy simply by changing their masks after they made an exit. Also, men could play the female characters. It wasn't until the 15th century that women actually started performing on the stage. Another important area of the ancient Greek theater was the theatron. The theatron literally meant the seeing place. This is where the audience sat during the performance. Often carved out of the side of a hill, the theatron would accommodate thousands of audience members. Even today, people marvel at the extraordinary acoustics of these ancient amphitheaters. There were also some scenic innovations that were added to the scena. One is the panaki. The panaki was a surface, thought to have been made of animal hide, on which a scene could be painted. This is an early version of the stock scenic device we refer to as the scenic flat. Another device was referred to as the ecoclemma. The ecoclemma was a wagon-like device that was used to roll out tableaus onto the raised stage of the Scena. The ecoclemma is an early version of the scenic wagon. Another scenic device that was invented during this time was the machina. The machina was a crane that would lower actors or scenery from the roof to the stage floor. This was a favorite device to use when productions wanted to create the illusion that a god was flying into the action. That covers the development of the physical theater of ancient Greek times. We'll get back to you after the assignment.